Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we tried to work with technology today. I just wanted to send this message to you as a little bit of a follow-up because I think our technology was not so fabulous. So, some key messages. First of all, thank you for inviting me to join you. And thank you for coming together as a group of educational interpreters focused on sustainable education for deaf people in Nigeria. I so appreciate the invitation, and I hope at some point I can come to Nigeria and actually be with you in person. Each of you, as interpreters, like me, value quality education. I know that in your heart that you support deaf children, you support education. It's an important role because the work that you do matters. It matters because those deaf children will be the future lawyers in Nigeria, future doctors, future teachers, future politicians, future scientists. And so the foundation that's laid through sign language interpreting at the earliest years is just such a key time. But what's really important to me in terms of a key message is that we take away the parts around, there's a lot of research now about interpreting. And the question is, are we applying that research in our training? So on the PowerPoint that I sent earlier, there's a number of steps that say, in terms of creating sustainable models of educational training, we have to make sure that we're building on the sign language research in our countries, that we're collaborating with deaf organizations, we're collaborating with university institutions that can support our training, and that we've got a very current evidence-based curriculum. That curriculum needs to be informed by current studies that are being done around the world, but it also needs to be informed by an understanding of what education is. So I said a couple of times this morning that education is not just about word sign, word sign, word sign. That machine model is not a helpful model for deaf children for learning, and we know that based on 30 years of research. What we know is important is that deaf children have access to a meaningful education. Meaningful means that they can participate socially, that they can participate academically, and that they are engaged intellectually. And when I keep saying those levels of engagement, those are challenging levels of engagement through mediation, through interpreting lenses. And so it requires us to have the most sophisticated language that we can. It requires us to understand what teachers are doing with language. When they ask good questions, it may be a metacognitive question. It may be a question designed to get the child to think about what do they know and what don't they know? What do they believe about this particular topic? And so all of those question forms, all of those ways of asking questions, there's a pause that asks people to reflect after. But if we just keep on interpreting and sending things towards the deaf child, they have no time to think. So there's important strategies and conversations that have to be held with teachers and interpreters in order to make the classroom work well. One of the things that I like interpreters to do is to think about classroom audits. And on the PowerPoint, you'll see that I talk a little bit about the idea that classrooms can be interpreted. They can be interpreted with modification, and sometimes they're impossible to interpret. But many of us have been given the idea that we just hire an interpreter and everything is signed and it's just great. And really, sometimes everything signed is just the worst thing that can happen. So sometimes we need to stop signing, for sure. What's impossible to interpret are places where teachers don't know that they need to change the rules of engagement, so to speak. And by that I mean that they have to pause, that we can't have multiple people talking at the same time, because if multiple people are talking at the same time, I have to choose who I interpret for, which means that the child doesn't get an equitable experience in that conversation. And peer conversations are really important. So if teachers can learn to modify, it can be interpreted. And all that means is one speaker at a time. One speaker at a time that allows me to identify who's speaking, lets the deaf child look and see what other child is answering the question, and then come back and see the interpretation. It's not a huge pause, but it allows for interpretation to happen. As opposed to the illusion of inclusion, which is the teacher allows all of that to happen in the classroom and we just keep on signing. They think it's good. It's not good. It doesn't include the child in any meaningful way. All they see is a snowstorm of signs. Snowstorm is probably not a good analogy for you in Africa, but they see just this constant bombardment of signs coming at their eyes, but none of it makes any sense. So I think really stopping to think about what does meaningful inclusion mean, and helping the teacher to understand the strategies that have to be done differently in order to include that deaf child. Many hearing teachers have no idea how to teach a deaf child. So part of our role will be to educate them. Part of our role as well, too, is to be able to understand what good deaf teachers do if it's direct education. In many of my studies, I talk about mediated versus direct. When we know about direct education, we can see what teachers do who are deaf themselves in order to engage learners socially, academically, and intellectually. If we can know what they do, we can often incorporate some of those strategies into our own work. So those are key things to do. On the PowerPoint that I offered you, there is a webinar that all of you can have access to at your own pace, your own style. And that webinar is all about educational interpreting and about how to prepare for the classroom work. So I really encourage all of you to take that webinar if you'd like, and then engage with me. Ask me questions, email me, Skype with me, and we can hopefully have a good connection and a conversation about that. There are a couple of ending slides that really emphasize the importance of lifelong learning. No matter how many years we've been in the field, there are always new things to learn. And so continue to learn through conferences like the one that you're holding right now. Continue to learn through all of those books that are available to teach us about interpreting. Continue to learn by, if you have access to the internet, academia.edu. Many of us as scholars post our research up there so that you have access to reading it, which can save you from ordering a book that's very, very expensive and waiting for it to come to you. So there's lots and lots of research that's available through Google Scholar. So there's no excuse not to be reading. But there's also an important message, I think, for all of us as interpreters, which is that we need to collaborate. That by competing, I'm better than you are, I'm not going to share my knowledge with you, doesn't serve our field well. We need to collaborate, we need to teach each other, share our talent in order to provide the highest level of service that we can to those deaf students that we're working with. So those are some key things that I wanted to leave you with. In terms of WESLI and how we might support Africa and the training of interpreters, in your PowerPoint you'll see that WESLI has an educational training document that outlines some of the building blocks that need to be in place. So good sign language instruction done by deaf people, good interpreter education, and we've given a number of topics there. So if those are not topics that you've been exposed to, those can be things that we ask you to build into your curriculum. Ways of working with the university in order to build a solid foundation of training will be really important in creating a sustainable model of deaf education. Our piece of deaf education is important, but we need to make sure that it's meaningful, that it's not just a machine model of sign and word, that our knowledge is based on a solid foundation of cognitive processing skills, meaning-based interpretation, natural language use, understanding teacher discourse, what they mean, how they mean it, what they're trying to do with language. So not just what they're saying, but what they're doing behind language. So some of those educational strategies need to be part of our training as educational interpreters as well too. Finally, I just want to close by saying that I hope that many of you will be able to somehow find the resources to come to Paris for 2019. It would be a delight to see you there, and I would very much welcome you at WESLI 2019. So again, congratulations on your conference. Thank you for the kind invitation to be with you. I wish each of you very, very good success in your career. Thank you very much.